Welcome to another episode of No Prescription Needed podcast. I'm here with Eric Geyer, the political pharmacist. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dr. Shaw. How about you?
I can't complain. Anytime I can sit down and talk pharmacy with somebody else who's trying to move the profession forward, it's always a good time in my book.
Yes, sir.
Um, for people who follow my channel, I not only do comedy videos, but sometimes I'll post things just about the profession. And I actually get a lot of messages from people who tell me that the profession of pharmacy is dead and I probably should just stick to comedy and not waste my time. And, I'm the type of person that I'd rather live my life. Let's say the profession of pharmacy is doomed and 20 years from now it's just terrible. Pharmacists are making like $30 an hour and no one wants to be a pharmacist. I'd rather live my life saying, hey, well, I tried my best to save the profession versus sitting there like, man, I wonder if I did a little bit more with my platform, could I have made a difference? So, and I take that with comedy too. I never know if I'll be a big comedian, but I'd rather, I'll be okay knowing that, hey, I tried my best and I just didn't make it versus, I didn't go all out to try to do comedy. I wonder if I could have been a comedic star. So that's kind of why I wanted to have this, where I wanted to talk about the importance of supporting pharmacy organizations financially. And we're going to break this up into 3 episodes. This episode, we're going to talk about supporting APHA and other organizations that support getting provider status. The next episode, why to support your state pharmacy associations and PBM reforms. And we're going to also talk about a new pharmacy organization, RPHA. And then the third episode, we'll talk about unions and whether it's something that could be helpful now. And the biggest thing that is important to me, or what I've noticed, is that when you type in provider status on Google, you can go back to like 2014, 2015, where you see articles saying like now is the time for provider status, and then type in 2016, and it kind of like repeats every year. But it seems like now with COVID, everybody kind of seeing the importance of pharmacists and our role, and especially when the vaccine is rolled out, it's like now or never, because I don't see any other time when we might be able to get that if it's not now. And I know APHA, I know there's other organizations, but I know APHA specifically has really been focusing on the provider status. And I think a lot of pharmacists need to support them. A lot of people say that they don't support organizations because they don't see change. And I think as a profession, we need to switch the mindset. Just because something doesn't change doesn't mean somebody didn't try,
Yeah.
I can't really fault the organization for if they can't get change, but they tried to the best of their abilities. A lot of this is like, the saying where it says to make money, you got to spend money. It's kind of the same thing. Like if you want change, to get change, you're going to have to spend some money. And with people not supporting the organization, it gets harder and harder. I know we'll talk about it more next podcast, but like with PBM reform, state pharmacy associations have a hard time because you know how many millions of dollars the PBM spend on lobbyists and donations and on lawyers, and it's almost impossible to compete if we don't support. So that's why I think it's important that everybody, especially right now, supports APHA initiative for the provider status. And I really wanted you to come on because I know you've had a lot of podcasts, and I've actually been listening to them to kind of increase my knowledge of this, of why provider status is so important and why now is like the perfect time.
Yeah. So now is the perfect time, exactly like you said, because of COVID, you're seeing pharmacists being pulled to do everything, whether it be testing, the vaccine. They specifically called out chains, and some states called out independents, but basically pharmacists are being utilized, and they're looking at it because we have the knowledge and we have the skills. And that's one of those things that I think people are finally recognizing is, oh, look, you have all these people who are already doing stuff like this. We need to utilize them better. Like, because if you look at some of the issues with the vaccines, there's like, obviously the Pfizer must be super cold. That's not going to be given at any retail pharmacy for the most part. But there's so many other factors in there that we need to step up to so we can really make a difference and help people and help put an end to this pandemic because of how badly it's been mismanaged and how many people refuse to acknowledge it and things like that. I think the other thing that why now is a big time, APHA, like they said, they're really pushing hard. Scott Knorr is a change agent guy. He was at the Cleveland Clinic. He is at APHA. If you just look at his comments and things he said and statements APHA put out since he took over, like officially got the handoff from Thomas Menahan previously, it's big. They've even expanded how many pharmacists, I think residencies or fellowships they have there. I think they increased it 6 times because they really want those boots on the ground, and they're really spending money because they know that the more people that they get right now pushing this in the next, we'll say year, but I think it'll be quicker than that. They need those people so that they can have all those points of contacts to reach out to people, because they don't have necessarily all the manpower right now. And like you said, you got to spend money to make money. Scott Knorr is doing that right now. He knows that, he didn't mean to take over in the middle of COVID. When I knew he was taking over, it was kind of right before that, but he's really going full force on this, and with good reason, because we're being asked to do so much, right? How can you be able to order a lab test or a vaccine order if you're not a provider? Okay, well, now we need to put it under a doctor's name or a state or some other sort of standing order, and that just all costs more money. So why not just cut out the middlemen, make us the providers, and save the healthcare system money, especially in a situation like this. The other reason is, and this is kind of a game changer, and I don't know if this is I think this is public knowledge, but if I remember correctly, a lot of the major other providers, like the nurse practitioners, the medical doctors, have all taken a step back. And where they used to be anti-provider status for us, they've now just kind of went neutral on it. And I think when you see all those orgs kind of move that way, that's huge, right? Like that's like, hey, look, they're recognizing it too. They might not be saying, let's do this, but they're saying, you know what, it makes sense, but we don't really have a dog in this fight. And I think that's huge. And that's one of those things that's like, now the gates are down, right? We're not fighting against each other. Now it's just us pushing. And I think that's why it's so big. And we're seeing all these different congressmen, state legislatures, et cetera, really recognize that their pharmacies need to stay open. And there's a reason for that, right? Like you're seeing grocery stores, some other retail, pharmacies and hospitals are the ones every single time that have to stay open. Like no matter, like unless you have an exposure or some major issue, right? And I think that underlines the importance of it, because something like 92 to 95% of people live within 5 miles of a pharmacy, but not nearly that many people live within 5 miles of a hospital. I don't know the stats, but I know it's nowhere near that. Where you live in Chicago, me and Cleveland, a little bit different story, obviously, but you go down to rural Illinois or rural Ohio, nobody might live anywhere near a hospital, but there's usually a pharmacy somewhere nearby, which is just that point of care. And when you're talking about massive populations we need to take care of, all 350 million Americans, yeah, we need all hands on deck. And there's only 320,000 pharmacists in the US, but if you look at where they're placed, it just happens to almost work perfectly for like a strategy of how do we expand care. And I think that's what they're really recognizing and seeing. And part of that could be messaging from people like Scott, Michael Hogue, Sandra Leal. But at the same time is, when you're having the government look at these things, they're going, oh, wow, this just makes sense. And you're seeing that I know my state, Ohio, where we have provider status, and we're seeing national articles written about what kind of good things it's doing. I think it was Modern Healthcare, which is, some people might not know it. It's not exactly like one of these little magazines. It's more on the level of JAMA than it is on Pharmacy Times, not to knock Pharmacy Times. But, it's a pretty well-known and well-respected topic that people read even internationally. And I think that's why now is the time to push for it. The other reason is obviously we're seeing job loss, as personally, right? Like, so, maybe we're being a little selfish. We're seeing 3% job loss. And in my state, we've got 7 colleges of pharmacy. That's a lot of people who are going to try and find jobs somewhere with 6 figures in debt. Why not utilize them, pay them for it, but utilize them in a way that can drive down healthcare costs? The stats somewhere along the way show that for every time you get a pharmacist to really step up in care, it saves anywhere from $3 to $22 for every dollar you spend. So like you said, you got to spend money to make money. Perfect example. If you pay someone 6 figures, you expect 6-figure results. And I think there's more and more studies coming out that just basically prove that. And that's really why we're seeing the major push. And that's why I've been so vigilant on my podcast to really make sure that this is something I'm like, hey, keep putting those reminders out there, because, and this is no slight to you, but, I want people like you to kind of hear this and get engaged. I want other people to hear it. And I want people to really be able to talk about it at a very high level with their legislators and, people who have contacts and power. It might be their mayor who has a good tie to, the state governor or something like that. All of a sudden he's dropping them hints of like, hey, I talked to this guy and made a good point. That chain of connection is just so huge here, and why everyone needs to be on board with it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And to me, That's why provider status is so important, because I talk to a lot of physicians and they tell me that, if pharmacists had provider status, they wouldn't mind having a pharmacist to kind of manage their chronic disease state patients and kind of follow them. And that's got to be like almost every clinic. Probably one of their
Yeah.
biggest things is just staying on top of their patients that have like diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia. And I don't think that I think people are so focused on the terrible working conditions in retails that they don't even think about that. They put that as like a lower priority. But I think by addressing that first, because not only for doctor's office, but think about it, if we were able to bill for those services, like the major chains are going to have pharmacists and hire more pharmacists, or at least give a big more tech hours so that the pharmacists can kind of utilize these services. I don't know if people actually think about that. Like getting provider status could, in my eyes, I could be wrong, help with some of the terrible working conditions in retail.
Yeah, for sure, and that's the exact same way I see it, and I've heard so many retail pharmacists. I hear a lot of people who come to me and say, "Yeah, we need provider status. I'm totally with you on this." But I have a lot of people who work, like me and like you used to in retail, and they're like, "I don't want this. It's gonna be more stuff on our plate." I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa! It might be more stuff, but I can guarantee you, if there's money to be earned somewhere, they're gonna spend money to make money, right? Like we see that every time, right? Like how many times did you have a freezer in a pharmacy before a vaccine was there? I know it's a very cheap example, but we didn't have them. And now that all of a sudden, hey, MMR, possibly COVID. Oh yeah, you know what? If there's a way that we can make money with this, we're going to spend that, a couple $1,000s because we can make more in the long end. And it's really a win-win for everybody because it helps their bottom line and it helps, save public health money, which saves you tax money on Medicaid, Medicare, things like that. So I think so many people look at this from that microcosm lens of, oh God, I'm going to have more, patient care calls to make and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, you might have a few more, but if that was your whole job, right, to like, call those people and to check up with them and to, go sit with them and talk about their diabetes or check their blood sugar, that's not a bad gig. Like, let's not poo poo on some of these things. Like if we had more time to do this, we'd be in a lot better shape. Like you said, that fixes a lot of the stuff that we're having to do and triage. And I mean, I've had two phones in my head before on answering patient questions before because the way it works sometimes in retail. And, that's not what we need for anything. So if we can remedy that, now you have the extra pharmacists there. Now you might have time to go take a lunch for a few minutes here and they can cover you while, then when you come back, they hop back in their roles. That's how doctors work in some hospitals. So why not? Why can't we do that? Nurses do that all day, every day. So that's just why I think that, hey, we should be included with some of this stuff too. And people shouldn't be afraid of it, man. Like when people sit here and say, well, now I got to do this, I got to change this. Yeah, we're going to expect that, but it's not like they're just going to say, do it on the fly. Like you legally have to have those conversations with people. There's checks and balances you got to do here. That's just medicine. And like you said, with the chronic disease states, especially diabetes and hypertension, those little push conversations are huge. I don't know how many times I've had conversations with people where I worked previously. Walmart has a mandatory counsel basically every time there's a new prescription. So many times I talk to an old guy and I'm like, yeah, try to make sure you're working out a little bit, you're doing something. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to try and bench 300 pounds again. I'm like, no, 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 no. You're 63 years old. Don't try and bench 300 pounds, man. Like just go get some miles on a treadmill, a nice steady pace, get your heart rate up a little bit, drink plenty of water. And it was crazy because he came back next time. He's like, you know what? Like, that does make sense. I get that. He's like, I started losing weight now. And, and he started sharing all these positive things with me and all from just one conversation. Now imagine if I got paid for that and was able to follow up with them more, like that's where the impact is here. And I think so many people, because of the stress of retail, are so scared of it. But look at what these independents are doing. They're able to use provider status, man. They're killing it out there and they're getting recognized by their governors and by national magazines. So why not?
I think I was wanting to know what your opinion is, but since my platform's kind of grown, especially like on LinkedIn, a lot of pharmacist entrepreneurs have reached out to me, and I didn't realize how many pharmacist entrepreneurs there are. And I always thought, like, man, if we could get provider status, there could be a lot of
Yep.
pharmacists who could develop other companies where they offer pharmacist services. To get paid for it. And that would just also even expand just the amount of job opportunities there, because there's people who are trying to actually have pharmacists run companies that utilize our clinical knowledge and skill set to improve the outcomes for the doctor's office, especially what, like, hospitals, they don't want their patients to being readmitted, and we can monitor them and do MTM and bill for all that stuff. I think that would open up even another avenue for more job opportunities for pharmacists.
Oh, immensely. And I mean, let's, as we kind of talk more about PBM reform in the future and stuff, look at what's one of the major issues doctors are pushing against PBMs and against healthcare with right now: prior authorizations. Like, we don't want prior authorizations. It hurts care, delays therapy. Well, if we get provider status and all of a sudden someone comes in and they're on Lantus, or that's what the prescription's for, but the insurance switches it to Basaglar, that's all they cover. They won't cover Lantus no matter what. I can look at it, assess the patient, talk with them, make sure it's right for them, make sure the dose is right. Boom, switch it. Here we go. You got everything the same day. We're out the door. You're taken care of. And there's no more delays. And it would drive the cost down because, now they don't have to go back to the ER to get a new prescription in case the doctor's office is closed and they need it, things like that. Talking about medication switches, right? So say someone's on, I don't know, like, diltiazem 360, but they're allergic to a dye. This is actually an issue I had before with a medication. They're allergic to a dye that's in the one for 360, but they could take the 180s because I think it was a red dye that didn't have in there, something like that, which is actually a fairly common allergy. Well, I had that one in stock. The CVS down the road didn't. They only carried the one that had the red dye and things like that. Well, I sat there and was like looking at the prescription going, I can switch this, in my head. Like, I would just call the doctor, switch this, boom, we're taken care of. No big deal. There we go. Well, that was something that couldn't happen at that time. That person also had a problem where the insurance made them go to CVS, which is a whole different story here. But, that's one of those things of like provider status would dovetail with PBM reform. We could take care of that person right there. But because we couldn't take care of them right there at my store, and the only other CVS had the one they were allergic to, that was in a different strength, they had to go back to the ER. And, I actually just, been very open about this. Went to the ER recently for Bell's palsy episode. $7,000 later, I'm back there with a prescription for prednisone, told to wait it out. I was just going to make sure I didn't have a stroke or anything. But that's the same thing. Like, people are going to face those huge bills when they start going to ER urgent care, more or less ER, that we could really take care of right there and maybe bill for a small service with it. So I see where there's a perfect business model for being an entrepreneur, like you said, and also being able to help lower healthcare costs.
The way I really look at things is we can kind of see the writing on the wall. If we do absolutely nothing, we know that pharmacists' salaries are going to go down. We've already seen that. I've already posted that where people were making $42.50 an hour, laid everybody else, laid the current pharmacists off and hired new pharmacists at that rate. I can imagine that in several years could go down to $35 an hour. I don't think that would be kind of unreasonable after what we've been seeing. We've been seeing that that terrible working conditions are just getting worse and worse, because you can even Google it. Like, I've seen articles since 2014 talking about, the terrible working conditions, pharmacists are under stress, no help, huge news articles year after year after year, but nothing has changed. So that's just going to get worse. So to me, it seems like, what do you have to lose by, at least for the next 2-3 years, of financially helping these organizations? Because what's going to happen if you don't. But at least if you support them and help them, there could be change. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but like, if pharmacist salaries actually got down to, like, let's say $35 an hour and conditions get worse, I don't think it's really necessarily worth the stress, the liability of you possibly killing somebody. So you won't even be, for me personally, I wouldn't be practicing as a pharmacist anyway. I would probably try to find something else. So to me, it's like so important, especially for the next 2 to 4 years, to really try to help these organizations. And I get it. Some people is like, oh, I don't want to pay the association fee. But I mean, that's what they use that money to help get these changes. And even besides that, without people, I could tell people don't even go to the website, because you can go to APHA's website right now and you could type in your address and they'll give you a list of your legislators. And it pretty much populates a form about provider status, just to let them know, like, hey, I'm in your area. I really think provider status is important, and this is why. And that's something that people can do without even having to give money.
Yeah.
And I really want people to know that, because that helps the profession. It's not like you have to give money to the organization if you're opposed to that. And I think we just, as pharmacists, just need to get more involved and stop, making so many excuses about trying to help the profession, because a lot of people just kind of like, they don't want to. I know a lot of people are scared to lose their job, and they feel if they speak out, there may be some retaliation. But I mean, there just comes a point where everybody needs to really be doing as much as possible. For me, like, on YouTube, I have like 15,000 followers, and on Facebook, I probably have 10. And I was like, if I could just get like 1,000 people,
Yeah.
just to support and help financially, that's all, that I would be more than happy, just to kind of help the organizations. And I know we've been talking about APHA, but what other organizations are really working to get provider status besides APHA?
Man, every single one of them is for pharmacy, whether it's ASHP, NCPA, I think SNAFA, like every one I can think of. There's so many, it's hard to list them all off, but they're all pushing for it, especially some of the health system ones, because they know that pharmacist could help do something in a point in time or make a change in a hospital or in a more setting like that we don't have to tap the physician for, because we all know they're overworked, right? That's just a huge thing. There's supposed to be a bigger shortage now of physicians in the next 10 years than there even is now. And there's 3 million physicians in the US. So we're going to be pushed to really push out a lot more physicians. There's only, like I said, 320,000 pharmacists, which is why we need to speak up. There's not as many of us, right? We're fighting this uphill battle of just pure math, right? That we just need more people to be engaged, or else stuff won't happen. Now, we don't get paid as much as physicians, but if you want to join a group like APHA, it's, I think maybe roughly, if you average the price over a whole year, $30 a month, maybe 35. I forget the exact math. So if you look at that, man, that's like one good dinner a night. So with COVID, you're not going out, just save a little bit of money, put it towards something like that. And, you can make an impact, maybe you eat a lower cut of steak that night or something, just whatever you're eating, it just, downgrade a notch, be a little frugal, go back to college days for a night or two. And, you can make a huge difference with this, because like you said, that money goes right to it. And, if pharmacists are getting paid less, then that's a huge deal, because the average pharmacist is coming out of school with $170,000 of student loan debt. No one's going to take on that burden if they're not going to get paid anywhere near where they can pay that off. Like, that's just, again, simple math. We're all seeing lower GPAs in pharmacy schools because of that, right? So if we don't have the jobs there, less people fighting to get in because they don't want the debt risk ratio, we're going to get worse pharmacists in theory. I don't want to say about the ones I know who graduated. They all seem pretty good, but in theory that could happen too. And then, like you said, with some of these jobs being pushed away, we really got to make sure that we're doing what we can to increase our field and use our knowledge, because no one's trained like us, right? How many times do we talk to a physician and they're like, I don't know, what do you think? Or yeah, that's a good suggestion, just go with that, or whatever you have on your shelf, that's okay, just switch it, all the time. And kind of going back to the politics side a little bit, even Andrew Yang called pharmacists out on the Democratic debate stage that we need to do something for jobs like ours, because they're going to be automated away in the future. And when we see giants like Amazon come in who are just known for automation, some people, I'm not as scared about that as other people, but that's something that we should really be looking at. What can we we don't being paid for a product is kind of key to what we do, and I still think there's a role for that. But really, we should be being paid for using our knowledge, right? Not just to double check things all the time, but we should be getting paid to, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation about this, right? If I can have a 5 or 10 minute conversation with somebody over a new script that's kind of in depth, a little more detail, and I'm compensated for that, I get paid, we have more roles, that person benefits, and then the government wins and saves tax money. I mean, it's a triple win all around. Who doesn't want that, in my opinion? So like you said, all those are great points, and that's why we need to support these organizations. Roughly $30 a month is what it costs, if I remember correctly, to join APHA. And I think it's a little cheaper if you join for 2 years. I know I did that when I signed up, because I was like, screw it, 2 years, here you go. And I just knew Scott Canora was such a change agent guy that, he's going to work his butt off like you wouldn't believe for the next couple of years. And he's doing it, man. Look at his, the people he's meeting with and stuff like that. I actually, it's kind of weird, since I have him on my podcast, I have his cell phone number, and he texts me all the time, stuff about retail, because he knows I'll give an honest opinion about it. And, that's the type of guy he is. And I don't think we've seen that in a pharmacy organization in a long time. And that's why, APHA is the one I support. It's the one I think affects retail pharmacy the most at this current point in time, and is really pushing on things that I agree with to help kind of make change, not just for pharmacy, but for society better as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to make a note that, I know we've been talking about APHA, and, we're not receiving any financial contributions at all from them. This is just our true, honest opinion. And I'm passionate about it. I've joined APHA. I've joined my state pharmacist association, and I haven't done that in years. But like, I really feel like these next 2 to 3 years are important. And I also contributed to your GoFundMe. Can you tell people more about that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. By the way, speaking of people who joined APHA, I know if you go on Twitter, there's a pretty famous pharmacist down there, but the Angry Pharmacist and Drug Monkey, they've seen so much change since Scott took over. They both joined, if I remember correctly. And they said it on Twitter, which was kind of one of those things that they were always rallying against it. So when you see them switch, you're going, wait a minute, something's happening here. But yeah, so thanks for bringing up my GoFundMe again. I started GoFundMe for provider status. All the money goes directly to advertise for, it's kind of like direct to marketing advertising to really kind of push for the provider status campaign, if you will. And that's been huge. I think we got $4,800 in change right now, plus whatever you just donated. I already cut the check, but this is kind of, following up with some money to help kind of push it a little further, if you will. So that's a huge thing that, we've really seen some progress with. And $5,000, just so people get an idea, that's like big time advertisement. Like if you do targeted marketing online, that's huge. And I'm not talking like just Facebook, right? Or like Twitter or something like that. I'm talking like the Hill magazine that all the people in DC read and go to for generally unbiased news sources and stuff like that. You're talking major media that you will look up with your phone. And if you go to thehill.com, look up what their ads are, almost all their ads are some sort of targeted political ad, right? And so you're talking about becoming a major player when you're getting that much money for stuff. So thanks for contributing to it. It's huge. We've had a lot of people do it. And I also make sure personally that anytime that any fees get taken out, I always match that back up. So if you donate $50 and they take off like, $2 for fee, I throw that back in. So this isn't just me promoting something. This is actually me also putting my money. So every donation that goes in, and maybe, if we hit 30,000, it might be a little different story or something, but every donation that keeps going in right now, I make sure I make all those even so that everything you're donating is going straight to the cause. So I think that if people can find it, go on GoFundMe, look for Pharmacist provider status, and it should pop right up, or message me or, Dr. Shaw here. We can connect you with the link. It's pretty obvious, but GoFundMe is a pretty easy site to navigate too. So thanks for donating. I hope some more people find that and send some of those letters in with APHA.
So just to recap ways they can support the effort to get provider status for pharmacists. One, support your pharmacy organizations, APHA, ASHP. I'm sure there's more than that. And if you don't want to do that, what you can do is also you can go to APHA's website. They have a link where you can just type in your address. It'll give you a list. They gave me a list of 3 different legislators, how to contact them by email. If you want to call them, everything's laid out. You really just have to read it. And that's to get your local politicians aware that, we're pretty passionate about this. And if they want to stay in office, this is something that they should kind of focus on. And also, like we just talked about, supporting the GoFundMe. I'll have the link in the comment section in the video so people can just click it for easy access. Do you have any other ways that people may be able to support the push for provider status?
One thing I did, so I'm in Ohio. I reached out to both my senators, right? One's a Republican, one's a Democrat. This is really a bipartisan issue. I wanted to make sure that's very clear because, no matter what, you got to make sure you play to your audience a little bit, like what they want. But I actually requested a meeting with both of them. And Senator Sherrod Brown's office called me back. We had a meeting. I talked with his office for about 30, 45 minutes, something like that, laid all the points, and then sent him a very, I don't say formulaic, but very in-depth email about everything. And, they got back to me. They said, you know what? Hey, Senator Brown supports this. He likes everything. Thank you for sharing this information. We will make sure to distribute this. That's huge. And all of that came from just going to his website and requesting a meeting, which I thought no way in hell I'm going to get this meeting, but it ended up happening. And I went to some of his, basically his person who helps write policy for healthcare is kind of who I ended up fielding the call for me. So pretty high up there. It goes right, reports right to him basically. And, that's another way you guys can do it too. The APHA thing is huge. It gives you names, but hey, do some more stuff on your own because sometimes those formulaic emails are good because they can at least keep a tally going. But when they know that someone cares and someone's going to be fighting for something, then it brings their ears up a lot more because they can tell a formula email from one you write by yourself.
Okay. Well, everybody, that's our time for now. On our next podcast, like I said, we're going to talk about why to support your state pharmacy associations and talk a little bit more about a new pharmacy association. I really want to say thank you to Eric for coming on. I love listening to his podcast because, it's so much going on in pharmacy where it's like PBM reform, where it's, staying up to date on the changes of what's going on in COVID, what's going on with trying to get provider status and things like that. And like listening to your podcast while I'm, changing my son's diaper or just working out just really helps me stay on top of what's going on in the profession of pharmacy. So I truly appreciate your podcast. And I also want people to comment. I want this to be a discussion. So whether you think, getting provider status is important, that's something that we should be doing. If you're for it or against it, just comment and give your opinions in the comment section below, because that's what I like, the open dialogue. I'll see people go back and forth as to why they believe we should support or not support, and that's what it's really all about. The more dialogue we get, the more people talking about it, I think also helps it as well. So
yeah, I always like to say, you can listen to my podcast, get some more details on stuff, get some stuff that's kind of more cut and dry, or into the weeds on some of these nerdy pharmacy things, but mix that up with what you're doing too with comedy, because you don't want to get too burnt out in politics. I listen to your stuff and it kind of helps levy it out and sometimes pokes fun at stuff I'm doing. But hey, you know what? Either way, you got to have a balancing act these days, especially with the stress of COVID. So.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Everybody, thanks for listening. And be sure to check out when we have the next episode on this. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dr. Shaw.